Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 17 of Demand Decoded. Thank you for tuning in and taking the time to join us. Today's topic is a very, very interesting one, and it's how to create an effective B2B content distribution strategy. And my colleague Dan is going to be in the spotlight for us today, answering some of my questions on this subject. I think it's really interesting because content distribution is, in my mind, fairly synonymous with what good or effective inbound marketing or inbound demand generation has become. It's really central to success in this sort of modern era that we're in. And what's also interesting is it's always been there. It's always been part of the process, but it hasn't always been necessarily top of mind or the thing that marketers put the most effort into for a variety of reasons. One potentially being that it was simpler in years gone by, because it was part of the content creation process to some extent, something that I think we'll touch on later. And there's more and more choices these days, so marketers need to be more intentional and focused about how they do it. But to dig into that, we've got Dan here today. How are you doing, Dan?
Yeah, this is a bit weird, actually. Obviously, the roles are usually reversed, and I'm the one asking you and others questions. But yeah, I'm under the spotlight. But yeah, it's an interesting topic, one I can hopefully share some insight into. Obviously, I think the phrase "content is king" has been around probably for as long as inbound marketing, kind of 2010 era, but as you kind of suggested, the power of distribution behind it has only become more important in the last kind of 5 years or so, even more significant in the last couple of years. So actually just producing content on its own is no longer good enough. And I'd argue the distribution behind it is probably more important. So having that strategy in place is critical right now.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll dive into it. But if you're watching live, as always, please feel free to ask your questions, put them into the comments, the chat on LinkedIn, and we will answer them as we go along. That would really make us happy. So please do that. And we'll take a look when they come in. So to start us off, you've teased it a little bit already, but can you explain what we think content distribution means and why it's important in B2B marketing at the moment?
Yeah. So first point, what is it? I think it's a fairly simple summary, to be honest. Content distribution is basically where you put your content, the places that you put it, and then subsequently the places that your audience find it. There's kind of not much more to it than that, really. The actual location of it doesn't kind of tell you whether it's distribution or not. It doesn't particularly matter as long as your audience are there. It could be search, a blog in search, a website page in search. It could be a video or an image on social. It could be an in-person event. You actually kind of talking to somebody one-on-one even, or talking to a wider audience. It's all content and it's all distribution, just in different forms. And I suppose the why side of it, kind of like I teased in the intro, it's essentially how your content is discovered, and the distribution is only becoming more important as things have changed and stuff like that, like behavior and just the internet more broadly. But without distribution, all of the content that you're creating go into huge efforts to create now, really. It's kind of going to waste because nobody can find it in the first place.
That's interesting. I think I imagine that when a lot of marketers think content distribution, their minds immediately go to certain places, certain channels and certain tactics. But it's important to remind them, as you did, that even your own website is a form of distribution. Anywhere that puts your content in contact with your buyer's mind, I don't know, eyes, is a distribution channel that you need to decide how you're going to use it. What else is going on, do you think, that's affecting or influencing or shaping the importance of distribution?
Probably, the whole movement behind buyer preferences, buyer behavior, internet evolution, with AI and just more and more channels and stuff like that. I suppose think of content creators and influencers, that kind of thing, they didn't exist 10 to 15 years ago. It's only kind of a more recent thing in modern times that they've, risen in popularity, got a ton of followers, millions, even billions of monthly kind of views and interactions, engagement on social and things like that. And yeah, that didn't exist before, but people now go to the internet, they go to social to consume content, to consume information. What was it before? TV? Who knows? But now it is. It's at our fingertips. Really, distribution can be absolutely anywhere and influenced so easily that the bar to actual content distribution, it's got easier to distribute content, I would say, in a lot of these places, but it's got harder to get attention. So it's got easier to put your content there, but it's getting harder and harder to actually get the attention. Would you agree?
Yeah. That's got me thinking. Your reference to TV there. I mean, I think there was a whole period of time where the inbox was key to distribution, right? The inbox was how B2B buyers in particular, connected with people and content. So that's worth bearing in mind. And I think that buyer behavior and marketing behavior exist in a pretty symbiotic relationship, where when buyers flee one location and go to another, marketers follow, and that drives the evolution forward. So those things, in combination with the way that consumer and buyer behavior has changed, and the technology they use has changed, has produced these shifts that have happened, from one place being the strongest leading location to distribute, whereas others have become much more relevant and impactful. And on that note, we always like to give actionable advice. So what are the channels that you think people ought to be considering, and how might they go about identifying the ones that they should explore further or lean into or make part of their strategy?
Yeah, I kind of want to base this answer a little bit on what we were talking before around the movement, because I just want to touch slightly more on that in terms of the movement from search to social and those two channels. There is a movement there. Everybody knows it. It is happening. Buyers are using social in many more ways than they did before. They're kind of interacting in communities within social. They're getting advice on social. They're consuming far more content on social than they did before. The kind of earlier stages of the buying process now are much more heavily influenced by social than they are search. Search is kind of reserved for later in the process, where people are kind of on problem discovery and research mode, and even sometimes all the way up until they're actually looking for a vendor. But those two channels are still incredibly important, right? So we still blog. We still have a blog that we try to publish content to weekly, sometimes more than that. But like I say, it is definitely reserved for further down the funnel, can we call it? Further down the buyer journey, I suppose, answering those core questions that they might have when selecting a solution potentially. Whereas social now, social is just an enormous beast now, isn't it? Because you could even say, is social a channel, or is LinkedIn the channel, or is TikTok the channel? Is Instagram the channel? Is YouTube and YouTube Shorts the channel? It's just, it's an absolute beast, right? Okay, so would I consider them separate channels or a social channel? I would say social is a broad stroke channel, but within social you have other channels. It's kind of like a pyramid. I don't know if there's much more to say on that, but I want to move on to YouTube as the next channel, if that's okay. Or do you want to talk about social?
No, carry on. I just want to bring this back to, what makes a channel worth looking at more closely, worth the time of marketers today. So bear that in mind as you go forward through the YouTube.
Yeah, well, ultimately that question is, which channels are worth looking at? Is, are your audience there?
Right.
Essentially.
Right.
So search, for example, most of your buyers are going to use search at some point in their buyer journey, even whether that's just to type in your website or your brand name. But buyers are still using search. And if your buyers are using social, using one of those channels, you should be there too. So I suppose the channel selection process, where you should distribute content, kind of just stems from understanding your audience, understanding your customers, understanding the people that could potentially buy from you, and wherever they like to be, wherever they like to consume content, post your content there. Like be in those places. So we've got things like SEO, search, social. YouTube is another one, a big one. But even like events, if you're in an industry where your buyers aren't really using social, it does happen in more kind of traditional, older kind of industries that are less akin to modern change, I suppose. If there are industry events and that's where your audience all gather twice a year, boom, be there. Like, why are you bothering to post TikToks or YouTube shorts or Instagram reels? Like, if they're at that event, that's where you're distributing your content. But if they're on TikTok, distribute your content there. If they like email, who knows? There might be people out there still that like email. I don't know anybody that does, but there might be. It might be a niche industry,
perhaps.
Yeah, it might be a niche industry that actually like consuming content in an email format. Do that. It all kind of starts with that buyer research, understanding your audience, and doing those things, I suppose.
Yeah. Anything else you want to mention, but in terms of channels that modern marketers ought to look into?
Well, it would be hard for me to not kind of say what we're doing now, because I truly believe the power of events, live events, bringing people together, answering questions, kind of building mini communities, mini followers, advocates for your brand, affinity for your brand is incredibly powerful. Podcasting, that this becomes, and most people listening will be listening via audio on this podcast. It's podcasting has absolutely ballooned. But again, like, there's no point doing podcasting if you find that your audience doesn't like it. Like, if who you're trying to sell to and what you're trying to sell doesn't fit within an audio and podcast format, there's literally no point in doing it. It's hard enough to measure as it is. You don't want to put yourself through that and put all the effort into it and just get nothing in return. I did actually dig out a stat on podcasting. It's for the US based, but it kind of gives a broad perspective. So the count of individuals engaging in weekly podcasts is going to hit, hopefully, 103.6 million by 2023. Right. That's weekly podcast listeners. 103 million.
Yeah. And I mean, we've been really pleasantly and humbly surprised by the reception that our relatively new podcast has already received. So it's definitely got legs in the right industries and verticals and so on. I think that it's almost impossible to separate the channel from the medium, right? The content that we did create in order to satisfy the requirements for success in a certain channel in days gone by may not work as you move to new channels. Does content distribution and the way it's changed affect how marketers should think about the content mediums that they should be using and looking at?
As in, just to clarify that, so as channels have evolved, do the mediums need to evolve with them?
Well, absolutely. can marketers take the exact content that they've been producing up to now and distribute it successfully in all these other new channels that their buyers are using to discover solutions?
No. No, plainly. It doesn't quite work like that, unfortunately. That would be great. And I think there was once a time where that kind of did happen, like written content that was essentially distributed to search via your website, blog, or pages. That was classed as distribution. Like that was a form of distribution and easy distribution. Click publish, Google does the rest. It serves it to your buyer in their feed in Google's format. It takes all your metadata and everything that it needs to serve it into this perfect, like 3 or 4 line kind of piece within the search results, and away you go. When it comes to distributing content into other channels, such as social, simply copying and pasting a URL of your blog, or a few lines from your blog, just really doesn't work anymore. And the reason being that you kind of have to think about the intent and the reason that people use certain channels. Like people are on social, on LinkedIn, for example. I'll talk like more towards LinkedIn because that's the majority. That's the place that the majority of B2B marketers will be playing. Like people go onto LinkedIn to consume content on LinkedIn.
Right. They
don't go onto LinkedIn to then click on your blog, to then click on your CTA at the end of your blog, to then download an ebook and then get that ebook and then click on some other things that you might have sent them by email. Like they're on that channel to consume content on that channel. That's the place they want to be. They want to stay in there. And when you're looking at formats, for example, like all you have to do now really is to browse LinkedIn to see the formats that people are really engaging with. Video is huge, short form video, like massive, and then you can kind of link to a longer form piece. But delivering that information up front in an engaging format that's creative, different, easy to consume in feed is incredibly important.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm hearing that potentially at different parts of the buying journey, the purchase process, and in different, to different degrees in different sectors, things like SEO, social, YouTube, podcasts are hot. Short form videos hot. Written content has its place. Audio content, podcast formats hot. Any other predictions, things that are not so hot going forward in your mind?
Things not so hot. Email, I think, is probably one starting to dwindle off. I'm sure there was in HubSpot's the state of inbound this year, their report showed some decline in email open rates and click-through rates and stuff like that.
Right.
The trouble is, like, kind of just a quick digress on email, like as email has become less and less effective, marketers are doing more and more of it to try and extract that value that they once had. So inboxes now are just an absolute mess. It is so hard to get attention from an inbox. It's incredibly hard to be creative, like in a subject line, to capture somebody's attention. It's very hard to get attention in an inbox in email. I would say, like, there are a few exceptions. Obviously, I subscribe to newsletters like Winter's, like Exit 5, and I read them like every time they're sent to me. But I think the difference is I subscribe to that and they deliver the value within the email itself. I only have to open the email and read it. I don't really have to do anything after that. I just close it and I have the value that I need. Yeah. The other one that kind of goes hand in hand with this, and I suppose it is a form of content distribution, is syndicated content syndication, where you're paying a vendor to distribute your content for you. So they will have a database of, you know, your target audience that you can then kind of select who you want to send this content to. And then they fire it away. It could be in your branding, could be in their branding. But it goes again into their email inbox. This is just even worse, right? Because they haven't even subscribed or entered their details onto your website, into your form, then really not expecting to hear from you, and probably aren't too interested in what you have to say. So it kind of seems like a bit of a waste to me. And I would certainly, going into 2024, have a serious look at the data that you've got from any content syndication work that you've done, the progression of those leads that you get back that actually convert into opportunities and customers. My bet for, you know, going forwards would be incredibly low, the actual conversion rate.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly seen poor results from that sort of thing. You know, not for some time, thankfully, because we haven't done an awful lot of it. But you know, in years gone by already, it was pretty poor. And you took the words right out of my mouth when it came to the state of, well, our inboxes. I mean, they're a disaster, right? You know which content you're looking forward to receiving, and you'll read just that. The rest of it, I mean, it's awful. It's just awful. So being ignored. But if you put the value up front, you can potentially create a connection. You can have success and be effective in that medium. That medium is not dead. No medium is dead. But if you're simply doing the same thing we've been doing for 10 years now, which is spamming people with links to click, not so great.
And I would add just one more point, that it's easier to get creative and get attention in other places. Like email, it's hard to be creative and stand out in email. Whereas when you're using channels, mediums, like social and even your website to some degree, it's much easier to get creative.
You're absolutely right. And actually, that reminds me of what is, I think, an interesting little note. Email is a notoriously horrible medium, like you say, to be creative in, to develop in, to market in. And I get an email probably monthly, maybe even more often, from one particular marketing organization. And I never opt out, I never unsubscribe, because everything in it, every time, is an image. There is not a single word in that email. So every time I see it, I smile to myself as I look at loads of blank space and red X's, and there's beyond the subject line, there's not a single thing that reaches me, because I don't enable and download those images automatically, and I keep allowing it into my inbox because it kind of lifts my mood every time it gets in there, but not for the right reasons, unfortunately. So yeah, you're dead right about the creativity aspect being really hampered in that.
And hard to do by the sound of things.
Yeah, because and we've always said, when it comes to email, we've always said simple is better, right? Because the more HTML, the more effort you put into your emails, the less likely it is that people will see it. It's like, it's an inverse law. So you're better off sending plain text if you're going to send anything, for reasons of mailbox behavior. But we don't want to get into the weeds on email marketing. Maybe that's another topic. Tell me, an interesting question, I think. Should people be paying for their content distribution? I think paid goes hand in hand and is pretty synonymous with this topic. Should people be paying for content distribution?
I think in the most part, yes, and people do. Most people would agree that you kind of have to. Obviously, going back to the channel question, it would depend if you have to pay for that channel, ultimately, I suppose. Like, if your buyers are only using search, for example, then you're not paying. Okay, if your buyers only use search, for example, then you don't have to pay to distribute there. Okay, you might have to pay like an SEO agency or freelancer to help you out a little bit and improve your visibility, and you're resourcing the time that you put into creating that content. But broadly speaking, Do you have to pay for content distribution? Probably yes, because you have to amplify the reach and the amount of people seeing your content. Take LinkedIn, for example. Purely posting on your organic feed probably isn't enough. Like, your company page followers are full of all sorts of people, really. You've got past employees on there, current customers, old customers, family members, who knows? It's a minefield audience, really. However, when you start looking to paid distribution, you can just tailor that audience to be to whoever you want, your exact target audience. So instead of just relying on, an organic audience that are never going to buy from you, you can instead just pay for that distribution to your exact target audience ultimately.
Yeah, agree. Just to sort of hammer that home, our networks on LinkedIn are very rarely curated groups of ICP, people.
Yeah.
But we know that if you focus your energy as marketers and as salespeople on your ICP, you have better results, and even better if you both do, right? So paying is the way, on LinkedIn at least, to offer up your content to your ICP. But we're obviously big believers in the philosophy of inbound. Isn't that outbound?
Oh, what, paid?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say so, I don't think, because outbound kind of tells me that you're going to disrupt me. You're going to interrupt me when I don't want to be in a place that I don't want you to be in there. Whereas content distribution in the form of like social, LinkedIn, for example, is quite force-free. It's a choice-based thing. Like, I see a blend video in the feed. I mean, I won't because of our targeting, but if somebody saw a blend LinkedIn video, sponsored content in the feed, they can just choose to scroll straight past it. They're choosing to be in that space, and it's widely accepted that you're going to get advertising in that space anyway. So I don't think I would consider it outbound because, yeah, it's not disruptive. It's not intrusive. It's quite natural there. I would add that it's important to focus content distribution on consumption, especially when you're paying for it. So many people associate just paying for anything with an instant result, like something to align the spend with. So like LinkedIn, for example, people only pay for LinkedIn lead gen ads because they're getting something tangible in return. They're spending this, they're getting this. Whereas in most places like social, content distribution needs to be focused on consumption within the feed. And yeah, just allowing your audience to be there in the moment and not try and force anything on them or force them away. Just let them be in the channel that they want to be in.
Yeah, I think that over the years, choice, control, and anonymity have become the things that are most synonymous with inbound as a philosophy for marketing. It perhaps never was simply about the direction of travel of a piece of content or of an interaction with it, although it did lean towards things that, we didn't push out. But it's not like a phone call that makes the phone ring, that's hard to ignore and stops you in your tracks at all. You leave people in control. And yeah, consumption over conversion is how you get the best, overall ROI from that sort of initiative. No doubt we'll have an opportunity to talk about that again sometime. Okay. All right. This bit, I'm excited about the next bit because we're going to lift the hood a little bit on some of the things that we're doing, at Blend, what our framework looks like to hopefully serve as not an identikit solution, because it won't work for everybody, but some ideas, some inspiration, right? So can you tell us a little bit about the framework that really, you've built and used to amplify Blend's content program?
Yeah, amplify the content and ultimately bring in high intent inquiries through our content, right? That's the aim of the game, and that's what we've tried to do and have done. So yeah, I hopefully want to give some thought behind what went on and the thinking behind the things that we've done. So yeah, I suppose what is our kind of content framework to kind of churn out a lot of content quite easily, but it's highly engaging, it gets a lot of reach, and yeah, it drives inquiries for us. So let's start with this, what we're doing right now. So we've started this LinkedIn live series called Demand Decoded, but it wasn't kind of just a finger in the wind kind of guess, like, oh, LinkedIn have a live streaming kind of capability, like let's use that. There was actually some thought behind it. So why did we choose LinkedIn Live as a format for us? So a few reasons. One, it allowed us to expand our reach significantly. Like we have a decent database of contacts that we could have promoted events to and things like that, but we actually knew more of our potential buyers and our audience, our market, are all on LinkedIn. So that's a great channel for us to use to amplify our events, to increase brand awareness, increase affinity for us. And that's ultimately where our audience are. So boom, LinkedIn tick the box for audience.
Yeah.
The second point was you don't require any details to be submitted to actually join a LinkedIn live event, unlike a traditional webinar where you'd have to, I mean, sometimes you get, tens of fields like asking you for all sorts of information, even if it's just name and email though, like having a live event that strips back all of that and just allows people to join, consume the content, go again without ever worrying if we're going to, send them spammy emails or cold call them. They don't have to worry about that. They can just get some hopefully useful insights and go about their day. But remember that we're the people that gave them that insight. Right. And actually one that I'm not sure many people think about is the retargeting possibilities that come from doing something like this and capturing information on LinkedIn. Like it actually does allow you to then retarget people who have registered, like again within feed consumption, in feed, like video based sponsored ads and things like that. Like again, we're not spamming anybody here, but it just allows you flexibility and then what you do further on LinkedIn with that audience that have watched your video. And I suppose doing it live was another thing, right? I wanted to pin you down and pin other people down in Blend to a set time that we're doing these things. So often when it comes to content creation and things like that, it can slip the net. It's not necessarily a priority always in everybody's eyes, and that's only natural. Things come up that are high priority, but actually for us, this works great as a way to pin this down for an hour or whatever, create a great piece of content that we can then use in other ways.
Yeah. I mean, I'll agree with you there wholeheartedly that this approach has made it incredibly easy to show up and deliver what's needed. But, now that we're over the first hump, I definitely think it's that reach and that accessibility that trumps the sort of certainty with which it happens in terms of value for businesses that are considering how to approach, video format and audio format content creation. And I think a lot of minds in marketing, particularly in mature organizations, just default to thinking about doing them in private, polished, locked down, walled off ways, that require, submission of data and information, and it's just at odds with what buyers really want, increasingly. So I think this approach has got loads of merits.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that by there's other people that I think have seen what we're doing and are kind of trying to do similar things. So I think like the benefit is being seen all around. We start. So yeah, we start with a LinkedIn Live. That gives us this great piece of long form content that we can then do lots of other great things with, like just repurposing the long form piece of content itself. So we finish this, it's edited a bit, full length video goes out onto YouTube, and then the full length audio gets distributed to a podcast network that then puts it on, Spotify and Apple Podcasts, all of those great places. So then that's the long form piece. And then basically we take this live event, split the kind of 2, 3 to 5 core takeaways up into miniature clips that are easily digestible, gives you a bit of flavor for the event, but also just some key insights. Not everybody kind of has the time to sit through a full event like this, and it just helps it be easier to digest. And not a full hour of information often isn't what you actually get back from an event. You usually just take away like 3 to 5 things, and that's just what we distribute basically, and that gets more reach. But we can move on to measurement afterwards. So yeah, we've got the long form repurposing of this, then short form repurposing. We distribute that on LinkedIn, mainly organic. And like I know I said about organic before, kind of not necessarily working that great because of your audience, but it is still an important thing for us and other companies to do, because even when then like companies are interested in working with you, people are interested in working with you, then when they go onto LinkedIn and kind of see that you're creating all of this great content that they resonate with, they really kind of get your message, it's still beneficial to do it. But where we see way more engagement and way more benefit from our short form clips is paying to distribute them to our ICP, our target customer. Because ultimately they're the people that resonate most with this, because they're the people we're trying to talk to. So yeah, I mean, we just put them into a cold campaign and then a retargeting campaign based off of that, and just distribute great clips in the feed that they can then consume. And then, go into a couple of different retargeting layers. And then ultimately at the end, we see that they heard about us through LinkedIn, which is great. The other way that this is then used, which isn't necessarily a natural evolution of the live event, but it's within like blogging itself. So for example, like the homepage solo event that you did on LinkedIn Live a couple of weeks ago, that was already a blog, but it could have been it could have been repurposed into a written blog article. But then also the full video, or broken down parts of that video, can then be uploaded to YouTube, embedded within the blog, to get all of that great SEO benefit that we all know that you get from YouTube, and then all of a sudden you've got the blog ranking in the top 3 on Google, but then you've also got a video in there as well. You might also have 2 videos in there as well. So there's a lot of benefit that you can get from creating that one big long form piece of content and then just using it in as many ways as possible.
Yeah. And it goes the other way too, right? Using, let's say for the sake of argument, using written content and cross-pollinating it with video form content, so that ideas that work and resonate in one format drive the creation of the other, and then also get weaved together, really is a way to, I think, scale the impact of adopting some of these approaches. So really well, strong performing pillar pages or blog articles are very likely great topics for live events, and vice versa.
Yeah, and then the video that you get from your live event, or just your video formatted content, is then great to put into your written content. One, for the SEO value, but then two, to kind of humanize your brand, build that further trust. I'm gonna dive in a bit here to AI now, and the ease of writing written content. Is it becoming less trustworthy? Maybe, but what isn't becoming less trustworthy is that person sat on the end of the camera, that's an actual human being talking to you, that you can connect with, that you can really feel and resonate with. And it definitely builds a deeper, meaningful connection with the brand, I think.
Absolutely. Agreed. Yeah. Fantastic. Okie dokie. On to the thornier subject of measurement. How can B2B marketers measure the success of their content distribution efforts? And I think it's interesting because we've hinted at the fact that content distribution is better aimed at consumption rather than conversion. So this creates some challenges, but over to you. How should people be looking at measurement?
Yeah, the reason why it was done like that before, and why people still try and just point people back to their website and point people into their CRM, is because then it's easy to get software to measure them. But there are other ways to measure content distribution and the effectiveness of it. I suppose I'd kind of break it down into 3 categories, 3 ways to look at it, and you get 3 very different views. One is the indicative metrics and insights that you get from your actual channels, like LinkedIn. So you're looking at the kind of people that are engaging with your content, the people that are leaving comments, that are liking, that are sharing. Are they part of your ICP? If so, it's a good sign that your content is resonating with the right people, that they're building more affinity for your brand, they're building more of a preference for you, they just resonate with what you're saying, basically. So it's a good indicator that you're doing the right things, especially when you're starting something completely new and you don't necessarily have the metrics out the back of like the pipeline and revenue. But it's a good kind of sign that you're on the right track, the right kind of people are interested. Keep going, basically. And then you've got the actual qualitative insights that might be from like existing customers, for example. They might be really enjoying your content and actually, telling you that, like, oh, wow, I saw this video on LinkedIn, or I saw this on TikTok, or saw you at this event. Like, it was really, really insightful. That's great as well. Like, great qualitative insight that your content is resonating with the right people. Ultimately, you want more of those customers. So keep going, keep doing those kind of things. And then obviously you have the all important like commercial metrics out the back. How is your content actually driving a business impact? How is it driving pipeline? How is it driving revenue? And like you kind of referred to there, when you're looking at content distribution from a consumption, not conversion standpoint, it's incredibly hard to measure the success through software. So that's where basically self-reported attribution just comes into its own, and it's the most incredible and important insight that you can receive on your inquiry form. Simply asking somebody, how did you hear about us, and then say the podcast or them say LinkedIn, is so useful, because you simply won't get that data from your software. Like, software will tell you that they found you through, I don't know, paid branded search or direct or organic, but actually how they heard about you was through your content. So it's incredibly important that you get that insight, and then you can tie back your self-reported attribution insight and, through the funnel, measure it. How many people, said they heard about you through LinkedIn, then that converted into an opportunity, then into a customer, so on and so on. And you can dice that up in as many ways as you want.
Yeah. And, our outlook is that given the really quite low, shockingly low in some situations, conversion rate from a typical lead to customer, we're always of the mind and prefer that businesses take a pipeline view of the impact of things. And in the context of content distribution, I think that means you need to be a little bit wary about optimizing for the metrics that are a measure of on-platform success, but may not be a measure of your commercial success. Doing things that increase clicks, increase impressions, increase spend, don't necessarily correlate with increasing, high intent conversions on your website or pipeline, because they start to pull you away from that focus on consumption. Build the affinity with your buyer before you seek to convert them into a lead that you're then going to bother via email and so on. So it's a mindset to take with you as you go and look at metrics, and you look at the advice that you get from a lot of sources actually, which may be focused on those very easy to influence, but not necessarily very healthy, constructive metrics on the platform.
Yeah, just to add to that, like, the platform metrics are useful and can guide you in creating the right kind of formats and altering the creatives maybe in your ads and your paid distribution. But really, to ultimately measure the success of content distribution, it has to run to pipeline and revenue.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you, Dan. That was fantastic, and I hope has served to inspire lots of those watching and those that listen. Really, really interesting to hear all about it. So thanks. Hopefully you've all enjoyed this episode of Demand Decoded. Be sure to follow the Blend LinkedIn page to be notified of future events. And of course, you can watch this and previous episodes on Blend's YouTube channel, or listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Just search for Demand Decoded and you'll find it somewhere. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.